Well, welcome back to Lighting the Candle, a World That Works. We are committed to having conversations that will go wherever they go and that we just plain have a lot of fun, being in the middle of. And it's our goal that because we're having so much fun and because we're really committed to creating empowerment and ways out of tight corners for our listeners, you at home, this is for you. I mean, we could be doing other things right now. And the reason that we're doing this is because we think highest and best use of our time, given the talents and experience that we have, in order to create the most difference in the shortest amount of time with people being empowered and passing the lit flame along to other people. Well, so with all that said, I'm Bill Correll, and I have with me again one of our founding partners. We've had so much fun. We're up to, I think, episode number 73, 74. And Ken, I don't know if you realize this or not, we're on all major podcast platforms, including Audible, including Amazon Music, including Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts. It's such a really cool thing to go on Audible. I've been buying their books on a monthly basis for years. And now I go on there and I look for Lighting the Candle, and son of a gun, there we are.
The cool thing.
Yeah. So, in fact, a lot of the training that we've gotten over the years has come through from books on tape, then books on CDs, then books on, MP3s or what have you.
Yep.
And we started off this last half hour, Ken, talking about the best day ever and what sort of manifestations that takes in personally, in small groups, in organizations. And what I'd like to do is maybe pose a question to you. How do we make this available on a large scale in a community, say, or across many thousands of people? How does this translate, and what's the best method, do you think?
I think probably I'll approach it from an organizational standpoint, because a lot of my experience is either with businesses or schools or not-for-profits, whatever, that kind of thing. And the thing that has helped us, that has worked for us, as far as creating safe, positive environments that are long-lasting, regardless of the inflow and outflow of specific people. It's like our martial arts school right now, for example, is being run by someone who started training with me when he was 5. Now he's almost 30, and he's running the school. He's like the 4th or 5th generation of leadership through all that time.
He is a phenomenal human being, and he would tell you.
Yes, he is. He is just such a great dude. So, and he's one of many. There's a whole group, and some have go and come back and flow in and out. It's just really cool. But I think it's been a focus on the human part of the organization and a commitment to a constant evolution of the ability to better understand each other and stay clear on the values that we choose to abide by organizationally and the results that we're committed to producing. And when those things kind of come together and we build practices, we talked about that the last time, so that you're preparing in advance for the difficulties that always arise in any organization, whether it's personality clashes or mistakes or poor choices. We're navigating it through the human perspective first, and we're staying clear on, the value lens that we're going to look through, and the actual result that needed to be produced. And the intersection of those things seems to be very, very helpful.
Terrific. So I'm listening to what you're saying, and I'm going to stay with the same question that I asked you for myself. And that is, with all that you've just said, and in terms of those practices and in terms of those things, intentionalities and measurement tools and all the rest of that, how does it get bigger than Quester's Way? Or how does it get bigger than progressive data systems? Or those sorts of things on a community level and all the rest of that? And I think my answer is that there's an element of potential. Well, it comes back to leadership more than anything, and leadership as a model, having more to do with direction than the how-to, right?
Yep.
That when you create a culture where we're all very sure, and as Stephen Covey says, all of our compasses are pointing to true north. That really means that we never have to trust our own compass. There's always going to be three other readings that we can take whenever there's a question about, is this appropriate or inappropriate for the journey that we have signed up for? So when I think about some of the things that worked really well in my life over the last 35 years, most of the ones that really did work well is where people made an agreement in advance before starting the journey that, yes, we're all doing these things together. They make the difference that we're all getting out of bed anxiously coming into this endeavor every single day. It guides us through our lives, whatever we're doing with family, friends, business, what have you. And that said, when there's an opportunity to be around other people in that you may meet accidentally, you may meet through secondary training through somebody else. It's often been said that a master always needs to have a master. And when you get to a point where mastery is your goal as opposed to performance goals, mastery in and of itself is the one that can never be completed fully. And in the end of the day, when there is an intention to be at the level of mastery in an organization, that means that whatever raw material is there, whatever, ideas, whatever empowerment is available at any point in the entire organization. I've seen one quick conversation by someone you didn't expect it to come through that turned the tide of what was called a not the best day ever into all of a sudden, holy mackerel, we got something we can engage here. Let's get busy,
Yep.
So it's all about, this, in my opinion, having first of all, the agreement with each other that this is what we're doing together. And as a result of our agreement, we can remind each other in a very powerful and yet supportive and also in a leadership, in that way, as opposed to corrective or punitive or it really comes down to whose turn is it to be at the front, of the goose wedge flying south.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, and it's interesting you mentioned about making it spread, and that's definitely something that we think about a lot because the goal is for Quester's Way to go global, and not to grow something big. It's to maximize the impact we believe that it can have on as many communities as possible. So then the question becomes, scale, especially from a business perspective, can be a challenging thing, because there's so many things that, the bigger you get, there's more moving pieces. And, so at the end of the day, our passionate belief is if you bet on the people and you put them in a position where they're supported and able to be their best selves, and they've got some guardrails, to help them understand what that means in this setting, there's no limit to scale. There's more than enough people who would love to be a part of something, that creates that. And now all you're doing is making sure that you continue to, adapt and be fluid while at the same time maintaining the structure that you need so it doesn't go rogue on you. So,
I do. And one of the things that I know, Ken, is that I oftentimes in my consulting with and the clients that I've had who had many employees, they would look at me kind of exasperated and say, I just don't seem to ever get the right people. And then I would go further, with them, and rather than cutting to the chase, because I think I know what the problem is here, but let's see if we can help, discover this together. And I would ask, well, what would you consider to be the right people? And almost to a person, they would say proper amount of training, and expertise at the position that I've hired them for, being motivated. And, we're talking about self-directing here when no one's looking, that sort of a thing. And then another one is intentionally, working towards making the company a better company. And then the probably the last one is just effort, that they're willing to put the amount of effort in that's necessary to do the job. And I said, well, how do you hire people? He says, I go through, well, I'm saying a he, but this is a generic for a group of people. They all say the same thing. We tested the crap out of these people. We gave them this test. We gave them that test. They interviewed 9 people here in the company and all the rest of that. They snuck through the door, hid out here a little while, and they're gone. And so I said, well, how many people have you hired in the last 2 years? I worked for one company. They said they had 50 employees. They said, we're losing 5 a month. I shook my head and I said, 5 a month? Yeah, we got 5 new people a month. And I said, you're making your shipping goals? Well, okay. So I said, what's your plan? How are you going to stop this? And they said, well, we just got to hire better people. And my answer to that was, let me see, how much are you spending per employee to get them pre-tested and interviewed and all the rest of that? Have you sat down? So sat down with one guy, we figured out they were paying $875 per likely candidate in terms of time, testing, et cetera, et cetera. And they had this horrible 10% turnover on a monthly basis. And what it ended up turning out to be was finally the guy said, I'm doing this all wrong, aren't I? I said, really? You think so? How so? How do you think you're doing it all wrong? I said, I'm trying to take, something that's completely subjective in an employee, and I'm trying to objectify it through tests and through scrutiny and through people trying to find out who's lying, I said, yeah, maybe what you don't need is people who are really good at what they do right now, or maybe they don't have, this kind of esprit de corps for your business performing at its best right at the moment because they don't really understand that or relate to it. Maybe they don't understand what efforts are going to be good for you and them. What if at the end of the day, what's missing here is the kind of glue that you need to have so that the entire structure continues to grow and not continuously implode on itself at the rate of 5 people a month. And I said, what if? And the answer that I got back is, wow, is that even possible? I said, is it possible? I said, stop hiring people. You are doing damage, to them and to yourself by hiring people. Just stop it, okay? Let's see what we can actually do with the people that you've got left. Let's start giving them, the room to start setting their own objectives and saying what they think they can do. Let's start setting the schedule according to what they say is attainable and is a little bit more than they could do last week, next week, et cetera. So that summarizes a whole different list of things that we sat down and said, we're going out and we're going to empower these human beings here to be in charge of their own destiny and grow this company. Well, what we found out is they didn't need 45 people or 50 people. We found out they actually needed 32. That was the optimum number of people for them to be able to make their sales and profit goal for the year. But what they had to do was be specific in terms of what the goals were, specific in terms of what everybody's responsibilities were, specific in terms of what the rewards were, and specific in terms of how people would be recognized for excellent performance. Just those 4 things made all the difference in the world. It took 90 days to put that structure into place. And then from then on, 32 employees. You know how much money they were wasting on a monthly basis, turning people over?
Yep.
So yeah, this is a true story. Anybody who's been consulting out there will be able to verify that this is factual. The names and locations have been changed to protect the innocent, but the fact of the matter is that most people grow to a point in their businesses as owner and CEO where they themselves become the problem. It's not their they're, it's not their inner nature. It's just that they used to be able to be very persuasive and charismatic when they had 15 people. And at
Mhm.
50, as you were saying, either in the last segment or in this one, Ken, that charisma and that stick-to-itiveness and that can-do spirit has to be in every single person's heart.
Mhm.
And if it's not in every single person's heart, it's in enough person's hearts that the ones who aren't feeling like playing today will be feeling like left out if they don't get up for the game with everyone else who's putting their nose down.
Mhm.
So that was a long story. And what I'm saying is, in answer to the question, I'll summarize it. This whole notion of how do we take this global? Well, the globalness comes from having a strong enough message that resonates with sufficient number of people who can carry that message, independent of the original person who helped generate it, on day one. That crackpot who said, "I'm going to start this business, and I'm just going to do what I got to do first to make a living, then to start having enough money to have a second employee, then et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera." And then all of a sudden, multi-locations, multinational, all the rest of this sort of thing. That gets done only one way: when there is a strong, strong backbone to not only the idea and the goodness of it, but its ability to resonate with enough good people. And again, we're talking about people that possess those talents of being growable. Their curiosity and inquisitiveness is second to none. And they love winning, which means they love being around winners. So they love making other people winners.
Yeah. It's funny. So when we had about 50 employees for Quester's Way, it fluctuated a little bit, but in there. And when we opened, I had actually never hired anyone who I hadn't grown, basically, because in the martial arts world, they were a student. So a lot of times your job interview had been going on for 5, 7, 10, 15 years. And then, you needed someone and they were trained and they, been involved and they saw you modeling the teaching is very easy, so I interviewed, over 6 weeks, probably about 150 people, hired 50, and within 2 years, only one was left. And, and I had never hired before, and I did all the things. I read all the books. I studied. I thought I, took the best practices, all of that stuff, and it was basically a complete disaster, And so, we had to learn from that, and it was an interesting place because there's Jim Collins talks about window and mirror maturity. When do you look in the mirror? When do you look out the window? When things go right, do you point out the window and give credit to all of the circumstances and support that allowed it? Or do you look in the mirror and congratulate yourself? And when things go wrong, it's the same thing. Do you blame everything outside of yourself, or do you look in the mirror and say, how can I do better? So, that always resonated with me. So when I realized I sucked at hiring, so the process that came out of that was our fitting room process, where really what we did was we invested a tremendous amount of time and effort in teaching people about what it meant to be a member of a team, of the Quester's Way team, and be very clear and very honest. And we call it the fitting room because the idea is, you walk into a store, you see that wonderful piece of clothing on the rack. You don't know if it's going to look good on you until you actually try it on, and sometimes it surprises you and it looks ugly on the rack and it looks great on. Some other times it's the reverse. And one of the things, and I've asked a lot of business owners this question over the last couple of years, very few of them have thought of it this way. How clear are they on the 3 essential core values with which that company operates that they will not compromise on? And these can't be just the poster on the wall or the mission statement or whatever. This is deep, as in, if there's any buts from anyone as we're educating them to these values, or they're pushing back against it, they're probably not going to be a good fit, right? And then the other question is, what are the human qualities, the core qualities of a human being that will allow them to succeed in your environment. Because so often it's not, they're not they're not bad employees. They're just not right. Their skill set doesn't align with what you need in your environment. So if you're clear on that, if you've done the deep dive into figuring out not how they need to be, but who would flourish, and start there. So like a big one for us was you have to be an intelligent decision maker. If you only can memorize policy or information and act on that, as opposed to think, okay, this situation just came up, and I now have to think fluidly based on the values of the company and how I've been trained, what the best thing to do is without actually having an answer in front of me. If that makes you uncomfortable or you're going to be paralyzed by that, you're probably not going to succeed in our company. It's going to be a very stressful environment because we're going to expect you to do your best, and we know you're going to make mistakes, and then we're all going to learn from your mistakes. That's how we grow and evolve as a company. Some people don't like that. They want answers, they want clarity, they want to know what to do, when to do it, how to do it. And so we got very clear on that. And there's literally 8 things, 4 couples of 8 things that we educate everyone on before they ever get hired, in advance of that. And there are 3 core values in descending order that we explain very clearly that everything is based on. So, so when you have that, now all of a sudden, instead of testing and hiring, you're having conversational learning, where you're learning about them and they're learning about you, and you're both working to determine how good the fit is, and we had people who on the surface they were 60% fit, kind of on a sliding scale. But then they were willing to change some things about their view or their style to better fit. So now we were clear on that up front, and we could document it. And then we could give them benchmarks so that we could see if they were actually committing to that. And if they weren't, at the end of 90 days, we'd have to agree that it wasn't going to work out. Those things were things that they weren't able to change, or they adopted them, and now they're a great fit. But it's just that clarity up front, and it took longer. It means you hire slower. It means you have to invest more up front. But by the time by the time the fitting room is placed, the people that were coming and applying and becoming members of the team did much better. And even after we closed, we're still getting together. They're still applying Quester's Way principles. They're ready to go wherever in the Northeast we go to open our next center, because it just resonated. We all got clear at the beginning and built from there. So those things were super, super helpful for us. And I think good ways to consider how you can scale,
So it's very, very interesting because you are, in my opinion, one of the most conservative human beings that I know, while being very liberally minded. Okay. And what I mean by that is no reference to any politics whatsoever, but you are a real, shall we say, a practitioner of creating really strong systems. Okay. And where I come from about that is that in your business, you sat down and you analytically approached it, and you said, I'm going to build this new business someday, and it's going to be called whatever it's going to be called. There may have been a metamorphosis till it finally, oh yeah, Quester's Way. Yeah, that's it.
There was. Yeah.
That's the ticket, So what's really interesting is that all of us get an opportunity to be in leadership positions in groups of people almost every single day. Even if it's just deciding, where we're all going for cocktails on Friday afternoon to get together and network, right? Mm-hmm. And there's always institutionality that goes along with that. I don't really like IPA. I'd much rather go to a wine bar, whatever it is. Okay. Mm-hmm. So where I really enjoyed being involved in creating things from the ground up had to do in the 1990s with neighborhood revitalization, downtown revitalization. We'd have a meeting, and 6 or 7 people would show up. And then all of a sudden, we're talking about we're going to do this thing. We're going to get a statewide uh, law passed that allows ordinances to be passed in each one of the cities, 169 towns in Connecticut, where each one of them can designate a geographic area that has particular uh, relaxation of certain building codes, the non-safety ones and the lead kids, all that good stuff. But how do we bring common sense to code that has been written so that blanket they can make sure something never ever happens again, right? So we had 6 or 7 people who came to the first meeting. And then all of a sudden, I asked 3 of those people to stand up and tell me what they were interested in producing in this community. And they did. And we kept notes on it. And then we put the notes out afterwards. And then people started passing those minutes on to other people. The next meeting, instead of 6 or 7, we probably had 21. And then we had 45. And then we had to move our venue from the town hall over to a church that had this huge, a basement room. And then we got a flip chart, and we basically said, our goal is to create a plan for the city of Willimantic to pass an ordinance that we have created a neighborhood revitalization zone. This is going to take into consideration everything from building code, and we're going to need people from all walks of life. We're going to need the school folks here. We're going to have every kind of minority, every kind of majority. We don't care. This is a people's work. We're going to do this together. And it became clear to me that we just had too many people to verbally, shout out what everybody thought was really important. And I said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to create 6 teams. We're going to create 6 chapters in this request for an ordinance and for this geographic area. They're going to be this, 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 and this. I want all the people that are interested in upgrading the school system over here. I want all the people who are interested in removing any of the barriers to being able to correct some sort of a serious problem with a rental property over here. I want, anybody who thinks that community policing is a really high priority, I want you over here. Funny enough, they almost were sort of equal sized groups. And then, so that we didn't have somebody have the burden of keeping track of what all the people's thoughts were, I went around and in the whole room, I said, here's what I want you to do. I want all of you to write down on a sticky note. So we passed out sticky notes to everybody that was there. I want you all to write down on a sticky note the top 5 things that you as individuals believe are the things that have to get corrected in the topic area of your group. And each one of them, again, we had flip charts all over the place, and they all went up, and each one put different things, the things that sort of glom together. It's called an affinity process. I'm sure you've used it. So at the end of all of this, what we've got is we've got this big sheet of paper with 60, 80, 100 different sticky notes on it. And the ones that are all similar in tone. And nobody asked each other's permission to write these things down. They just wrote them down.
Yeah.
And then we posted them all for people to walk around and take a look at. And people from other groups, did anything get missed here in any of these thoughts that are up there? The next thing you know, we've got people that are changing groups. I love what these guys are doing over here. And I think I can probably do a better job over there than I can, being over here with the community policing or whatever it was. So the whole idea that I was playing with a notion that people will apply themselves wholeheartedly to something where they have at least some sort of competency, a commitment, and at the end of the day, something that they want to see different in the world, that they can apply themselves and they can see themselves being part of the solution. So we did all of that. We were the fastest in the state of Connecticut to create a plan and get the ordinance passed for our neighborhood revitalization zone. And the long and the short of it was, we just allowed people to do what was a natural action for them.
Yeah. Yep.
Do you know how we kept attendance?
No.
when somebody wasn't there, the next time everybody on the team said, really wonderful to have you back. We love your energy. We love your ideas. 100%. That was it.
Yeah, well, that's going to establish trust and a sense of safety, and you know, and the fact that you want them there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really, obviously, I feel very passionate about how that all went down. There was nobody who was questioned. We had PhDs, and we had, people that all walks of life. Let's just say that, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Unemployed people, people who were recovering addicts, the whole 9 yards. And I don't know, the quality of what we did or anything of that nature, but the process, I got lost in it. It was absolutely fantastic.
Yeah. Well, and that's the cool thing. And if it's, and it's always been interesting to me, especially when you're looking at if it's any more than one person, there has to be this fusion of, creativity and freedom with clearly defined boundaries and a lot of rigor, you know? So it's like it's a katana, the sword of katana. What makes it so strong is soft and hard metal folded around each other.
Yeah.
If it's just soft, it can't hold an edge. If it's just hard, it's brittle. It'll
Flexible.
snap.
Yep.
So yeah, so it's the fusion of the two, and it's finding that balance, and it was always interesting to us through our process. If you designed an environment and systems that made it easy for people to make the right choice as it relates to your organization, your business, whatever it is, and your extra energy to make the wrong choice, that's a signal that that relationship, that partnership may not be working out. But at least you can have a conversation about it, because now instead of them doing the things they're doing because they're easier, that you make it easy for them to do the things that support the outcomes of the organization. And if they go against that, that kind of stands out now, and it's easier to address. So again, that's why it always came back to, for us, it was design. And even in the classroom, I hated the term classroom management.
Yeah.
And we shifted that. We do not talk about classroom management. We talk about focused attention. And with the idea being, how do we make it easier for them to engage in the class? And, and then when they don't, it stands out because they're going against the design, not us saying, oh, kids nowadays, they don't know how to pay attention. It's like, no, kids have always been kids. I've worked with kids for 40 years. They're just kids. So, and they may express differently and, whatever, but they're all just kids. So from our perspective, it's all right, kids are going to be kids. How do we create an environment? Our understanding of learning has evolved, especially over the last 15 years. So we can apply that to the environment, and then let's see what stands out now, and we offer them extra support, or they find a design flaw. It's funny, before we opened Quester's Way, we had that giant indoor park. First thing we did to figure out how safe the playscape and all the equipment was, we brought a bunch of kids in there and we let them just go crazy. And immediately they found all the things that we had to address before we opened to the public. We just turned them loose.
Yep.
And we didn't yell at them for not doing it right or not doing what we expected them to do. We paid attention to what they actually did, and then we modified the environment, so different approach, but it worked well for us. So
it's actually what I consider management's job. If there's somebody who's accountable for the direction of the company, it has less to do with correcting behavior and more to do to find out what's a natural action for all the participants. That way, you can give them the room to kind of like muddle around for a minute, get the direction, go where the goal ultimately is. And when they've done that and they've signed themselves up for, I can do this, get out of their way.
Yep. Yeah, and it would just be funny, we'd have people try things and then they're like, well, that didn't work, and it became a fun story, and it became something we all learned from. And invariably something better came out of it. Like some of our best systems came from bad reviews. You know, I loved getting bad reviews because those are the ones that actually gave us feedback that was actionable. You know, telling us we did a great job doesn't actually help, other than to keep doing those things to sustain that level of quality. But you know, it was all the mistakes. It's like we in the beginning, you know, it's when you practice, you get to test things, take risks, and screw up, and that's where the real progress is made. So yeah, so you design things that allow for that without it becoming disastrous, where someone's going to get hurt, you know, something of that. You still need the boundaries. You need the banks to the river, but make sure it's a river, not a dam. You know.
I completely agree. We're getting pretty much to the top of the half hour here. Ken, if you're going to summarize, we've spent two great sessions, kind of kicking around the whole notion of best day ever, and then taking it from a personal standpoint for individuals, then for teams of people, and then for communities. Anything you want to say to kind of like summarize it from your point of view? Maybe anything new that came up today that you think is interesting?
I think just recognizing that there's a, you know, it's helpful to get very clear for yourself. You know, who are you in the way that you choose to move through the world, and the things you want to be a part of. You know, and getting clear on that. Get really good at communicating that and asking questions so that you can find alignment. And when things don't align with you, that's okay. You don't have to be a part of everything, and you don't really need to judge things that don't, as long as someone's making choices that aren't hurting, you know, other people. I mean, you know, like, I mean, you don't want to align with someone who's a mass murderer. That's, you know, there are lines that should not be crossed, but within that, you know, we were just fine. Like, you know, it's, if your value is, you know, you want predictable structure, find other people who want that. But don't get angry at people who love chaos and free thinking and a lack of structure. It's just different. And there's room for all of it. It feels like that's some of the tension that we see, you know, in communities and in organizations and even in families, you know. But I think it starts, I just wonder how much of it starts with every human being taking personal responsibility to be clear on who they are, you know, what they truly value, not the surface stuff, the deeper stuff, and how they're going to move through the world as gracefully and with as much balance as possible, knowing those things and knowing that other people will not agree and will be different from them. And that's okay.
Yes, that's all predictable. And if it happens, you should go, wow, how smart I was to think that was going to happen, you know,
Yeah.
as opposed to, well, that happened and I'm not prepared to deal with it.
Yeah.
So excellent. And I just want to say from my perspective, I remain 100% sure and committed and absolutely certain that there are no issues that we as groups of people, human beings, that once we've decided that we've got more things alike than we do things that are not alike, and that we're all pretty much going the same direction and we want the same outcomes, we need some time, you know, to get our own direction and figure out where our compass pointing north leads us as a beginning. And the last thing that kind of, you know, became again very clear to me, someone has to lead first.
Yep.
There always has to be some sort of spontaneous leadership first to get things moving in a direction where other people can then express themselves in a natural way, and that there's self-expression and joy all the way along the entire path. So
what's always struck me, just to follow off that, because this thought just flashed into my mind, the best leaders I've seen were the ones that stood up and set an example that inspired others to follow and understand better. Like, you know, they didn't tell people what to do. They stood up and they did it, you know, and they were brave enough to do it, even if it was risky. And then that became almost like magnetic, you know, and it attracted people without them having to, you know, yell and scream and jump on the soapbox, you know. So
100% agree. And I'm going to say this to our leaders at home. People are watching you all day long, wherever you go, whatever you do. You're a leader, and you know it because people are listening to what you have to say. They are following your direction verbally and non-verbally. And when you take the time to just really notice that this is going on around you and in your world, you will have an opportunity. Remember, I told you, Bill Correll said this on July 27th, 2021. There will be an aha moment for you. And between now and then, when that aha moment happens, I'm going to ask you, as I do almost every single week, believe none of what you hear and only half of what you see, because we are lighting the candle, a world that works. That's where we're going, ladies and gentlemen. Come on along. We will see you again after Thursday, where this is a catch-up exercise. And man, what a catch-up exercise it's been, Ken. Thank you so much.
yeah, this was fun.
All right, bye, y'all. Tune us in, and we'll look forward to speaking to you again very soon. Bye-bye for now.
You've been listening to Lighting the Candle, a world that works, part of the Exvadio Podcast Network. You can hear us at exvadio.com/podcasts, Apple Podcasts app, Google Play, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, and wherever you find podcasts.